You must be bored every day. I was listening in to that
Hey, everyone.
show this morning.
Hey, everyone. Final Cut Pro Radio Live. And look who we have today. I'm going to see if I can point right just from memory. I did. Brad Olson. Brad Olson over in my top left. Serena Catania, bottom left. And right below me, Chuck Braverman. Chuck, you and Serena are both from California, right?
I am. Yeah.
Well, I'm in California.
You're
I'm
in
not
California.
from California.
That's what
I'm
I
an
meant.
Army brat. You can't ask an Army brat where they're from.
You and Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison was an Army brat or an Air Force brat or something. Navy. His dad was maybe he was a Navy admiral. He was actually in Virginia, right down. He went to school in Virginia. Jim Morrison did. He died on July the 3rd, 1971.
Wow. How do you know all that stuff?
Because I was on the way to Ocean City with my band that day. And actually, Jim Morrison was put in the ground on July the 3rd, but they didn't announce it till like 5 or 6 days later, so they wouldn't have a crowd. So we were on our way to Ocean City that day, and I was in Eldersburg, where I live, and they announced it on the radio, and we were stunned. Everybody was stunned. I remember where I was. And Brad Olson.
There are a few people who have fallen that we really remember exactly where we were at the exact moment when it happened.
Well, the curious thing about Jim Morrison is he died on July the 3rd, and so did Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones. He also died on July the 3rd. And they were both 27 years old, but July the 3rd, 1969, Brian Jones died. He drowned in the swimming pool.
27 seems to be a dangerous age for rock
stars. Yep. Kurt Cobain, I believe, was 27. Jimi Hendrix was 27. I think Janis Joplin was 20. No, I think they were all with 27s. They called the 27 Club.
What about Elvis's grandson that just died? I think he was 27 too.
Was he? And Brad Olson, you're from Utah.
Yep, and I'm not 27 or a rock star or dead.
But you're close. You're close to being a rock star.
And you're closer to 27 than either of us.
That's right.
That's
still it's in the rear view, but yeah, I was there more recently.
Exactly. So what the heck 12K? Come on. I mean, I was thinking, 6K, maybe 8K, and all of a sudden there's this leapfrog by Black Magic yesterday. Was anybody expecting that? I hadn't seen that 12K anywhere in the news.
No, I wasn't expecting 12K. I was thinking they would do a full frame 8K camera, like to compete against maybe the red sensor or whatever. But it would. And then when I heard 12K, I thought maybe it would be a full frame sensor because maybe they could take their 6K pocket sensor and put two of them side by side and give us a full frame. But that's not what they did either. They designed an entirely different type of sensor. So I don't know. I have a lot of things to pontificate here, but I want to hear questions.
Well, absolutely. We already have a question. The number one question. The first question is time for B-Raw and Final Cut Pro 10.
He's well past time for B-Raw.
Well, it is well past time for B-Raw. But people talk about there's political things happening with Black Magic and Final Cut. Get rid of that nonsense. Just put it in, whatever it takes.
Yesterday, did you see any PCs playing back the 12K footage? Because I didn't.
No, just a Mac Pro.
And Grant even made a MacBook Pro and a Mac Pro. And Grant even made a point to say that they are ahead on the development for 12K B-Raw on Mac OS, and they're still working on the other platforms. So they've made it a priority to optimize this for Metal and for the Mac, which tells me that Blackmagic likes Apple. So
right.
They do.
What's the holdup? I don't know. Maybe when we get our first Apple Silicon Mac this fall or something.
Well, but they
I was hoping for a little plugin I could download from Blackmagic that would let me bring in my B-Raw footage.
Right, like Red. Red has one, don't they?
You can convert it to ProRes and then bring it in.
Yeah, they don't want to do that. People want they want the Red. They want all the controls in Final Cut, the raw controls.
Well, eventually, but for right now, it's not that big of a deal, really.
Well, so I was talking to somebody about a project that they may be shooting on Blackmagic cameras. The DP is going to want to shoot B-Raw, And my whole selling point when I do these little independent films is that we're going to offload the footage and get cutting as quickly as possible. And transcoding is a huge barrier in the way of my efficiency. So I do not want to transcode. I don't have to do it with Red Raw. I don't have to do it with ProRes. I don't want to have to do it with Blackmagic. You're right, you can. It just adds to the time. And when you're making a micro budget film and it's a 2-week shoot and you want to have a cut of that film in that time period, every minute you're waiting for something counts against you. So yes, I want it in.
Be more patient, Brad. Just be patient.
I just have to wake up at 3 a.m. like you did this morning.
Yeah.
Which I'm not willing to
do.
Didn't you shoot the Final Cut Pro film on Blackmagic? Or no?
Yeah, I shot it on the original Blackmagic cinema camera primarily, also a little bit on the Red Raven and a Canon C300 Mark II. I'm actually looking over at my original Blackmagic camera. It's not hooked up as a webcam right now.
So then what did you just transferred and cut on Final Cut?
So Blackmagic RAW's a newer format and did not exist when I was shooting my documentary. I just shot straight to ProRes. And the cameras still shoot in ProRes. It's just when you have a DP who says I have to do RAW, and I hate having those fights.
Right. So
you would be fighting with me, Brad, and we're friends.
All right. I mean, yeah, I love B-RAW. I want to cut in Final Cut, and it doesn't support it. So
I agree. I'm not going to switch NLEs yet. I have to say yet. Because there's no marriage in me and Final Cut as far as the future goes. From here in the past, yes, but not going to the future. I could certainly switch to another NLE if there were things I needed. I'm not planning on it. I'm not saying that.
You have to change the name of your branding.
Well, that's exactly right. Although when I went on Twitter and got FCPRadio, I had to add the number 1 because there's an FCPRadio full court press radio. So I could be creative and come up with something. No, I'm not planning on it.
What you should do is reverse the X, so it's X-FCPRadio.
I don't have an X in it. I don't have an X.
Well, I'm saying you put it beforehand like it's the former.
I see. Right. Of course. So one of the questions I have, the guy from Blackmagic, what's his name?
Grant Petty.
Grant.
So you're friends with Grant, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, they're big supporters of my work. Once I switched to Blackmagic cameras for video, I've tried the other cameras, and I can't afford to shoot with the high end, the high end $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $170,000 cameras. So for my documentaries, I've been using Blackmagic cameras. I've used practically every iteration. The pocket cameras, remember the big Ursa when it first came out? And then 2 versions of the Ursa Mini. And actually yesterday I'm thinking, darn, I just bought the Mac Pro, and I just bought a 128 terabyte Thunder Bay 8 from OWC. So I spent a lot of money recently, and I'm thinking, darn it, I really want that new camera. I think Grant was right on going right to 12K. Well, I mean, it costs millions of dollars to develop these new cameras. This is his own sensor. They developed it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Let's talk about the basics first. Okay. Number 1 is the price point is amazing for a 12K camera, right? Isn't it? It's stunning. Yes. $9,000, although Australia it's $20,000. Is their economy that bad? It said $19,500 some dollars in Australia.
You've got apples and oranges. You can't compare the Australian dollar with. It's not the same thing. So you don't know what the average wage is in Australia versus here. The
one thing he did with this new camera is you can use all your peripherals. You can use the same viewfinder. You can use the same battery packs. You can use the same cards.
Jumping the gun. The big question I think is why 12K when we're not even really using 8K? I mean, what's the
have an answer.
I know, I consider myself sort of a techie, but the kind that's dangerous. So I know just a little bit enough to get in trouble, and I don't pretend to be a programmer or a real techie or anything like that. And I don't understand 8K. We just basically switched over to 4K.
No, it's for streaming, Chuck. It's obviously for streaming, right?
It's for YouTube.
Okay, so there's
12K.
There's actually a really good technical reason to go to 12K, and Grant does talk about it in his presentation, and I did a lot of thinking about this last night, and I was like, oh, aha. So he went back to the whole history of sensors, and he talked about the 3 prism sensors that we used to have in broadcast cameras,
right,
and the issues with that, and he talked about Bayer pattern sensors, which if you look at Red's patents, it's very specific that they have a patent on compressed raw using a Bayer pattern sensor. So in an effort to maybe leap ahead in sensor technology, in a way they're kind of looking to the past. You guys remember the Sony F35 and the Panavision Genesis, which were actually the same camera? It was the Panavision Genesis was a Sony F35 just rebranded. And they used an RGB stripe sensor. And that RGB stripe sensor was actually a 6K sensor, but what it gave you in HD was a full raster blue channel, a full raster red channel, full raster green channel to make an HD image. So there was no demosaicing, or in the case of a Bayer pattern, debayering. If you remember, if you think about current sensors in most digital cinema cameras, they're the Bayer patterns where they have twice as many green pixels as red and blue. And in order to resolve the resolution, there's algorithms in place that that your software, your computer has to churn through to guess what those blue and red values would be over the green pixels and vice versa with the other pixels. So anyway, that's a lot of computational power. Now think about the 12K sensor. He said it was a symmetrical sensor. It's not a Bayer pattern, which means there's an even amount of red, green, and blue pixels. So now you have 4K red, like a pure 4K red channel, a pure 4K blue channel, pure 4K green channel, full RGB. And the other interesting thing about it is, yes, it's a 12K sensor, but you don't have to shoot 12K raw. You can shoot 8K raw, and you can shoot 4K raw, and it uses the whole sensor. Now think about shooting 4K raw on this sensor. You don't actually have to demosaic anything because you have a full 4K red, green, and blue channels. So we avoid that step of the processing, which makes it far more efficient. And it's our first true fully RGB rastered 4K sensor that has been put out to market. That's why 12K. And yes, if somebody wants to shoot 12K and it'll do the demosaicing and whatever, you can do that. But I think this is the first time we've really gotten a true 4K camera that has all 3 channels. Does that make sense? Do I need to break that down anymore?
Well, it also has white pixels, right? RGB and white, I heard. I read that today.
There's a fourth one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'm not right on the whole number of photo sites then, if there's a white thrown in there as well.
I've read that on the Black Magic forums today. People were saying no, it doesn't. Somebody said yes, it does. He said specifically, blah blah blah. So.
Well, that's an interesting thing I didn't know, because that gives you a clean luminance channel as well.
You're geeking out here too much, I think. I go back. It's like when I'm teaching film and I say to the kids and they show something, I say, "What is this film about? And I'm saying about 12K. I still don't get it. What's the point? Nobody ever came out of a theater saying, "Oh my God, when you saw 1917, they didn't come out and say the Airy LF or large. They didn't talk about the Airy. They talked about the story."
Yeah.
And,
well, that's always been true. I just think in terms of image fidelity. And this white pixel thing is not something I'd considered, but that makes sense because then you get a pure luminance channel. To me, it's all about getting the perfect crisp 4K and maybe a really, really good 8K. Now, 8K, it's hard for me to justify the 8K delivery, but the Japanese are marching on with the televisions, and that'll just be a thing. But I can definitely.
The first clue. When Sony comes out with an 8K television, you know that the rest of the industry is going to follow. Remember when they first came out with 4K and all of our friends were saying, no, we'll never shoot in 4K. And I said, yes, I saw it at CES.
Yeah,
I saw a preview of it at CES. And, a couple years later, we're all delivering in 4K. I can think of creatively right now a scene that I would shoot with the 12K that would really, really help me. And this particular project is for theatrical. So that makes a difference too. This one's not going to be just for YouTube or streaming on a mobile phone. It's for a big screen, and I'm picturing in my mind, and this is what cameras do to me. Chuck, I'm more like you. I'm, in a recent interview, Annie Leibovitz says, I'm not technical at all. And I went, thank God. I think I'm kind of a geek, but Brad, you know much more about how to take these things apart and analyze them than I do. I go by how the camera works in my hands, right, what I see through the lens, and what I get when I bring it all back and start editing with it. And it's like flipping on the light switch. I can't tell you exactly how that works, and I can't change it, but I know the light works. But this one scene, if you picture it in 12K, just picture, and I've already shot it with the Ursa Mini. I want to reshoot it with 12K because you only get one shot when you're shooting, for example, Chianti towards the end at a track meet. He's only going to come off that block one time. After 5 years of filming him, is he going to make the team? Is he not going to make the team? And I want to be shooting him in a way that I can punch in on his eyes, punch in on his leg, punch in on the blocks, go wide.
Just
and I've got all of that with one shot. Yeah,
right.
And you got a good deep focus.
Exactly.
Well, Serena,
but it's great.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, and Chuck is absolutely correct. Listen, the Beatles could neither read nor write music.
Seriously? Why did I not know that? And I love the Beatles.
They did rudimentary. They didn't use charts. They didn't use notation to write their music. Of course, they wrote the lyrics down. Neither can Bob Dylan.
And they only had a 4-track.
That's right. two 4-tracks for Sgt. Pepper's. They linked up 2 4-tracks, from what I understand.
Okay, 6 degrees of separation. Here's a funny thing. I just interviewed Felix Cavaliere. Remember the songs Groove In, Beautiful Morning,
Mm-hmm.
People Got to Be Free? The Beatles opened for him in Germany when he was with a group in Germany in the late 60s.
Early 60s, not late 60s. It must have been, because after 64, forget it.
It was because I was living in France at the time. Yes, I was living in France. But that's before the Beatles came out with Komm gib mir deine Hand, which was I Want to Hold Your Hand.
In German, right. That was a German version. Because they were in Hamburg, Germany. That's where one of the places they were playing. So we have 2 distinct tracks to talk about here. Number one is Chuck and Serena and somewhat myself, who needs 12K? And the other one is the technicalities of 12K with the sensor. So the idea that, listen, Grant Petty is a genius. Mm-hmm. He has now gone and said, okay, I am the sensor all the way through post. I made the sensor, the camera, the entire pipeline is now, their entire pipeline is now controlled by Blackmagic. Now, one of the questions I had was, they showed like 9 streams of 12K on the Mac Pro. Does that require to be B-RAW? Is that required to be B-RAW?
Probably, yeah. I mean,
required. He shot it in B-RAW. He was
exclusively, right? So that camera exclusively is B-RAW. Does it shoot ProRes RAW?
It will shoot not ProRes RAW, but it may shoot ProRes.
ProRes. I'm sorry.
Stepped out for a second.
Yeah. That's what I meant. ProRes. Sorry.
Yeah. I would assume they would give those options, but we don't know. I haven't seen anything on paper as far as what resolutions and what options there will be in ProRes. I imagine if they have a ProRes, it'll be 8K ProRes. There's Chuck's back with us. Yeah, I don't know. But as far as the B-RAW, Apple was showing like 6 streams of 8K ProRes RAW. Blackmagic RAW had, one of the things we know about it is it does demosaicing, half of the demosaicing in camera.
Right.
And I
right.
have to say demosaicing and not debayering because this is not a Bayer pattern sensor. Again, my little geeky thing there. But because of that, there's less stress put on the computer for processing, which is how they're getting away with additional streams. And think about this. Each one of those 12K images is 80 megapixels.
It's just astounding.
Insane.
I mean,
and one of the surprising things to me is I would have, again, I went back, I would have thought they would have got up to a full frame sensor, because one of the challenges we have in terms of lenses is most lenses, unless you're getting like a $50,000 or $40,000 cinema lens, is not going to resolve, especially in a Super 35 sensor.
Right.
It's not going to give you 12K in resolution. You're lucky to get 4 or 5K from the majority of like a Zeiss lens even. So it's, maybe in the future we'll have sharper and sharper lenses, but if I was using this camera today, I would probably shoot 4K B-RAW, where you're going to have less intensive processing and less data to deal with, and you have that more complete blue, green, and red channel without having to demosaic or make up, assume pixel values. And then maybe 8K, but it'd be really hard to convince me to shoot 12K unless I knew I was shooting that one shot where I'm like Serena's talking about, where I want to like crop in. But most things I'd shoot, I would, I'm also not a big believer in you always have to have the fire hose on full blast. Like,
right.
It just seems like a waste of space and processing power, and I don't have that much hard drive space. There's a lot of other considerations. So I love the fact that they gave us, he called it on sensor scaling. So you're still using you're not cropping in, you're using the full sensor, but getting these different resolutions and still having that raw capability. And that's what I started thinking about last night. So apologize, it's a bit geeky, but I think there's a practical discussion to be had of, well, why would you do that? And I think the answer is because now you get a really good 8K and you get the world's very first fully rasterized 4K.
Brad, do you think that the Zeiss 70 to 200 2.8 could handle this? I think it could.
Well, I think you'd be fine shooting with any lens. I'm just saying if you I would be interested. I'd have to see the focus charts, but most lenses I know of, if you threw a focus chart and you're trying to see, they used to do this with broadcast cameras all the time, and we've kind of gotten to a ludicrous resolution, so we don't care anymore. But you used to throw a chart up, and it would show you like, oh, this camera can resolve 1,000 lines of resolution, was the thing they'd always say, and now I'd be like, can you really see that much detail through the lens? Like, can we really make a lens that sharp to hit a Super 35? I mean, I could believe a full frame 8K sensor could probably, on one of those larger lenses, get you close to 8K, but I'd be shocked. And like Chuck says, I don't think anybody cares at that point.
No,
I have to tell you, that scene that I shot with one of the scenes I shot with the 7200, I had it at 200 because I wanted to be as far away as possible. Yeah. But I could see his eyelashes, and I was shooting 4K, and I can see his eyelashes. It's a close up of his face, and he slowly looks up, and you can actually see every eyelash. And so I imagine.
How far are we cropping in to see that, or was it just the detail you were noticing?
That was just, no, I didn't crop in. That was from the camera, from the lens, and I pushed it to 200 and filmed him like this.
Okay. Yeah.
And you can see his eyelashes. So I'm imagining that at 12K, when you combine those Zeiss lenses with something like this Blackmagic, it's probably awesome.
You'd probably notice more and more lens defects and smudgy spots than you would like higher detail.
I was watching a movie the other night on Netflix with my wife called, I think, I was sitting here trying to remember the name of the movie, Always, Never, Sometimes, Always, no, Never, Sometimes, Rarely, Always, something like that. Really good little independent movie, probably shot in 3 weeks. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at it. I just turned to my wife at one point. I said, I bet you that was shot in 16 millimeter. And she said, well, how do you know that? And I'm looking at it and I can see the grain in the film.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, and so of course I had to open my laptop, go to IMDb Pro and go to the technical stuff. And sure enough, it was shot in Super 16 with Panaflex lenses and all that. And the point that I'm trying to get at is that it was not cheaper to shoot 16 millimeter. They could have shot with a red or an Arri, probably that would have been cheaper than buying film, processing film, and having to transfer the film to get it into Final Cut or whatever.
Right.
And again, and their choice of shooting in 16, I thought was excellent because it had kind of that gritty documentary-ish look to it, as opposed to what Bradley's talking about, the world's sharpest picture. And I'm looking at, like your picture, Richard, right now that's coming through my 5K iMac. It's as sharp and it's clear and as crisp as anything, and well lit. And how much more sharp do you need it to be? I mean,
well, and if I was to put on my Michael Cioni hat, he makes the argument that higher resolutions that we're past the sharpness discussion, and he likes to call it smoothness. That as you get more pixels, you get more of that gradation between colors and whatever. That's he waxes poetic on that. I like what you're saying about 16 millimeter film because what it makes me think about is more like, am I going to paint with oils or watercolors? Or am I going to use pastels or colored pencils? It becomes more aesthetic choice. And of course, in post, if you shoot mega high resolution, it kind of opens up some more of those options for you. But I think in choosing a camera or format, there's the two sides. We can have the geeky technical argument, or we can talk about the actual art of it. And and I always say, it's like, what is this? What is the content? What's the story you're trying to tell, and where are you trying to show it? That should be more of a determining factor of what format, what lenses.
Absolutely.
Than like, well, I can just get the most resolution in the world.
Right. So one of the things,
the varied frame rates too that you can get with this new camera. That's exciting. That's very exciting.
The other thing you left out is you started to compare the new camera with the Red or the Arri or something like that. Blackmagic is in a totally different niche. It's a different market. The camera's what, 10 grand for the body, I think?
Yeah, it's incredible.
That's relatively, affordable compared to a Red or Arri or any of the high-end Sony. What does a Venice cost? So
a lot. I have a friend though.
Nobody ever came out of the theater saying, "Wow, the color, the textures in that Venice camera or that Arri," or because most everything is shot with an Arri in theatrical films.
So we just got a comment. I wanted you to comment on. Glass will be the limiting factor for 12K. You'll need a $6,000 piece of glass. This, is that true?
That's what I was saying. Is I don't know. You'd have to do a test of lenses, but I don't know how many lenses can actually resolve a full 12K. Gotcha. If we were to do that, at the same time, do I really care? I may be okay with shooting with a lens that can only resolve 4K on a Super 35, still record it in 12K, because I'm getting, I don't know, more characteristics from the lens. It's just something you'd have to test and see for yourself. Me personally, if I had this camera, I would most everything I'd shoot in it would be 4K.
Well, we're shooting. Well, yeah, and it's ironic in a way that this camera is coming out now in the middle of the pandemic when all the theaters are closed, because
that's the other thing.
Like IMAX screen, and now we're all watching stuff at home, and at the best we're watching on 4K streamed. really true 4K.
Absolutely, Chuck. You're absolutely correct. Because, I mean, the theaters, are they ever going to recover? I mean, a lot of businesses are not going to recover.
That's a big conversation that I've been thinking a lot about. But
but no, so we still have two distinct discussions. One technical, and Brad's doing the most of that. And then do we need 12K? Well, the fact is we don't need 12K, but since they can do it, why not do it at that price point, right?
I think Grant was really smart to do it because now he's got a camera that's going to last for a while. I mean, unless he just changes some of the features, he's spent, I don't know how many millions of dollars in development on this camera, and he's just jumped the gun on everybody. I think it's really brilliant.
Well,
he's just brilliant. And also for the person that was asking about lenses, the 70 to 200 lens is between $12,000 and $14,000, depending on where you buy it. But it's worth, that's why you either rent it or you borrow it.
Right.
But it's worth it.
Yeah. Sorry. What was the first part you were saying that Grant is smart to do this in the future? Oh, yeah. I think again, I would just emphasize. I know this it's a little geeky, but the fact that he broke tradition and developed a different sensor with a different pattern that I think will produce cleaner color channels because they'll be equal, and rather than having to deal with the Bayer pattern, I think that's a real breakthrough. And you said they've got patents on that, so he's set a new trend. Red really was the one who made the Bayer pattern single sensor a popular thing, and we've lived with that for over a decade. And now we're like, hey, maybe we can rethink sensor technology. I think the next leap past this is to combine the really smart stuff that's in one of these phones, because these have tiny chips and they have to do computational photography, right? Apple has to do all this software to reduce noise and sharpen and everything like that. And my question is, what if you take the technology in here and combine it with a high resolution sensor? Then what types of images can you produce?
And of course, the big question is Final Cut Pro going to support 12K?
Sure, why not?
Well, I mean, it doesn't. There's a limit now. Is it 6 or 8K? Technically,
I don't think there's I think you can custom any resolution. I don't know if there's if you go to the custom projects. I mean, I've never really had any need to do it, but I don't think there's a limit. I think you can type in whatever pixels you want and have whatever canvas size. Whether or not that's going to perform well or play back, that's, I guess, obviously we talked about BRAW not being supported yet.
Right.
Which is, I think, especially now a huge need. And Apple, I thought it was really cool that Grant did a presentation and all he had was a MacBook Pro, and he said, look, we can play it back here, and here's a Mac Pro, and we can do 9 streams. And he said, we are working on platform support for Windows and Linux, but right now we're ahead with the development of Mac OS. Right. It tells me that Blackmagic and Apple have a good relationship. Blackmagic likes Apple for them to be developing this first, and that Metal is a really good, is a really good thing Apple developed that Blackmagic is taking advantage of. So I think it might take some time, but maybe by the end of this year we'll be in a completely different place in terms of these limitations that are very, very frustrating at the moment.
So the one other question is, how much storage space is required for 12K?
I'm hoping they.
Wait a second. Now you just jammed into the wall, didn't you?
No, absolutely, Chuck. Because I'm shooting on a GH5 and my files are much smaller than ProRes, and I like that small file size. So.
And by the way, I want to just say, even though I'm sort of poo-pooing the idea of 12K, I think Grant and Blackmagic are great. I'm happy that they're doing this and
absolutely,
and they're pushing the envelope. And they're I guarantee you that everybody at Apple is like, back in their seat, sort of stunned at what's going on and thinking, what are we going to do and how do we keep up? Because they want to be known as the innovators and not the followers.
No, don't delay Final Cut anymore. Grant, if you made Final Cut delay because of this, I'll really be pissed off. We don't need any more excuses why we don't have Final Cut Pro 10.5. That's not. Don't use this as an excuse.
On the storage thing, there's the new. I have a T5, but they have the new T7 drives.
Right.
And one of the cool things about Blackmagic compared to say Red with proprietary media is they have a little dock that you can put drives into.
Drives in, right.
Or you can hook up a USB-C, and you can get like a 2 or 4 terabyte, relatively inexpensive compared to like, CFast card, which you can also use.
Right.
So at least in the capturing side of it, we're not totally screwed. The longer term storage, I mean, I guess if Serena will let us use some of her 128 terabytes, that might help. But I do love the fact, like I shoot on these. This is a 2 terabyte little guy I can plug into my pocket.
You can probably shoot for about 12 seconds with 2 terabytes, right?
No, it's they
actually, that's what the 12K stands for. It's a terabyte a second, probably.
So, Brad, I'm wondering if this camera can, because it can record to an external drive. I'm wondering with the new Envoy Express, or however you pronounce it from OWC, you can use any M2 NVMe SSD drive, and those things are screamers. So maybe we could plug one of those in using the Envoy Express casing and record to the NVMe SSD drive. I'm wondering. I'm going to ask the guys at OWC. Why wouldn't that work?
That type of drive works with the actual dock that they have a little thing that mounts to the back.
That's the Envoy Express.
Right.
Have you heard of the new Envoy Express?
Yes.
I'm saying Blackmagic's has one. So it uses the what did you say, the MVTI?
NVMe.
NVMe.
Yeah, so you can actually put one of those SSDs in to that. So I see no reason, if you have a USB-C cable and a little enclosure, I see no reason why you couldn't do that. It works. The
reason is this: they're Thunderbolt 3, not USB.
It's Thunderbolt 3.
So
it weighs 3.3 ounces.
But the Thunderbolt 3 is where you get the speed.
Yeah.
Well, that's where you get the speed.
You reach a throttle. So with USB-C and USB 3.1 or whatever.
3.2.
The drives themselves are only so fast. So yeah, Thunderbolt 3 has 40 gigabits or whatever gigabytes a second, but you're not capping. That's not the bandwidth limitation. The bandwidth limitation is the speed of the drive.
No. What I'm saying is, does the 12K camera have Thunderbolt 3 connectivity? It has USB-C connectivity, right?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have. So the NVMe is not going to really do it anything different than a regular Thunderbolt, a regular USB 3 drive would do.
Well, those new NVMEs from OWC, and I don't have the specs in front of me, they're very, very fast.
Right, but the camera doesn't support Thunderbolt 3, so it's not going to make any.
Are we sure?
I'm not sure.
Well, I know with this one, this is USB, not Thunderbolt.
Right.
And these work with the Blackmagic cameras right now. So but at the same time, my Thunderbolt 3 hard drive also can connect over USB. So I don't know. You'd have to test it.
Maybe I was dreaming, but I thought I don't know. I have to look at the camera. We're going to have to do some tests with this camera.
Bring it out and show us, Serena. Your camera, your 12K. We want to see it. Right? We want to see it.
Well, you've got one on the bar behind you, don't you?
Yeah, I have one behind the bar. A couple of them. They came in.
I think the big point is that's why you could still buy this camera. You don't have to shoot everything in 12K. Save some space, shoot 8K or 4K. I'd be happy shooting 4K, and it'd still be raw. You still get all the controls that you want as far as white balance and exposure. So that's how I would use it right now, and I would definitely test the 12K, and if there was a specific need for it, I would think about it. But it'll be a while before I haven't seen capacities and speed go up so fast that we can handle such an insane amount of data yet.
Right.
But somebody out there can handle it. I mean, RE raw is an insane data rate. Here's the other thing too. A lot of people are scared of higher compression ratios, but when you get up to like 8K and out to 12K, you can get away with higher and higher compression ratios. Like if I was shooting 12K, and they probably don't have it right now. They probably have just the 12:1 Blackmagic RAW, I think is the highest compressed. But at 12K, I'd be happy to go to 31:1 compression, because you're never going to see that compression at that microscopic of a level.
Right.
For that
feels
stuff.
like an oxymoron in a way, though, doesn't it? Like you have a large file, but you're compressing it more, or you can have a small file and not compress it much, right?
Good point, Chuck. Good point.
Yeah, but the compression ratios are quite smart, and when I've shot on red in like 5K, 6K resolution, the higher we go, like 12 at 6K, shooting 12:1 compression ratio looks really fantastic, and you can still zoom in on that stuff. So
right.
I'm one who's not shy from doing that, but you still kind of get that. I think the big thing is super sampling can always be a benefit, no matter what you're recording in. For the final image, if you've got a super sampled sensor, it that helps through the pipeline in terms of quality.
Just to get back to the basics for a second, the three most important things: story, story, and story.
Huh? That's
It
weird.
doesn't matter.
And audio. Don't forget audio.
And
Well, you can't understand the story if you can't hear it.
Huh?
Yeah.
Although you probably can make something that's story that's all visual. So
Yeah, well, they have, of course, some of the silent movies,
audio
which is brilliant.
asterisk.
Well, yeah, Skotsky and those films, but you have to see that in a big theater, which doesn't exist right now.
Right.
Yeah, I was thinking about
Oh,
buying
it
a
will.
projector.
They're not going to. I hope they don't go away.
Well, they were already
I wonder
suffering.
how it handles audio. By the way, I think it has 4-channel audio.
It has
It's the
an
same-
eighth-inch
it's the
mini
same
jack.
body.
Eighth-inch
Yeah.
mini.
No, it's the same. It's the same.
No.
The same externally. Externally, it's the same camera as the Ursa Mini Pro. It's the same external body.
Okay.
They said they've gutted the whole thing out. It's all different internals, but I think it's the same. I mean, you can go on the website and look this up. It's got the same inputs and outputs as what's currently available with the 4.6.
So maybe if I take my Ursa Mini Pro and I ship it to Blackmagic and I say, "Can you change the innards and give me a discount?"
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
I
kidding.
don't think that's the most expensive part of the camera, but sure.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
it's the
that'll
same
be $9,500.
same outside. It looks the same. When you show up on location, they won't know how many K you are. You have to.
Right.
No, it has a big
Well, you've
label
got
on
the
the
big
side.
12K on the side.
Yeah.
It's advertising it. Yeah.
So somebody just said one charming cork said one USB Type C 3.1 Gen 2. That's what it has. That's what somebody said. So
So the
Thank
Samsung P7 would be a really good drive to hook up over USB. Or if you want to use NVMe whatever drives, then you could consider buying that unit to slap on the back and stick your cards in there.
right.
Which is a heck of a lot more affordable than buying, proprietary media from Red or one of the approved cards for an Alexa.
Alex Johnson
think-
says 2 XLRs with phantom power. That's what it has. That's excellent. Hopefully both mic and line switchable.
Yeah, that's the Pocket 6K has a switch between mic and line for its XLR input. So
Christopher says it comes with an 1/8-inch mini with you get a free Rode mic, wireless Go mic. With it.
there you go. Tape that to the front.
Brad, how much are the T7s? I know the 4 terabyte Aurora NVMe from OWC. I was looking at it yesterday because I need to get one. They run about, I think it's $1,000. Or maybe that's a 2 terabyte.
So I'm just.
While
gonna
he's
look
looking
up-
that up, I have to apologize, but I have to bail out. I have
No
a
problemo.
conference right now.
Chuck, do you want to plug anything?
Yes, Weststock Online. Thank you.
Absolutely.
57 episodes of great content all about documentaries at www.westdockonline.com.
What's your
Oh, that's
favorite?
awesome.
What's your favorite one?
My favorite one is the last one I did, which is Josh Braun from Submarine, who talks about, how do you sell a film for $12 million to Apple and how he got started in the business and everything else. And my
Excellent.
favorite, I mean, my last one is always favorite. Although I must say, Josh Braun.
You were supposed to say your favorite one was when I was on, but okay, missed opportunity. Next time.
You're right. It's a missed opportunity. Well, that was a great show too. Thank you for the plug. I've got to go now because I'm supposed to be on.
Bye, Chuck. Nice to see you.
Later.
Thanks for stopping over, Chuck. Appreciate it.
Okay, so answer your question. Samsung T7 portable SSD, 2 terabytes, which is the largest one I can find on Amazon, $330.
There you go.
And it does up to 1050 megabytes a second. I'm sure it's different between read and write. Write is a little bit slower. Reads up to 1050 megabytes a second. So plenty fast to handle, some really high data rates. And,
you know what we need to do, you guys? We need to do some testing of this new equipment. And we need to test the lenses. We need to test the drives. We need to test the camera.
Are you going to email Grant so he'll send it all out?
I'm going to beg.
And
maybe they'll lend it to me for like a week or something.
We're in 3 different locations, and then we can't really get together because of the quarantine. So he's going to have to send it to all of us, one for each of us.
There you go.
And then we can all, we can all use them as our webcams and just see if Richard's key can get a little bit better. I see a tiny bit of green in the hair. So I think that's why you need the 12K. So that
exactly. I posted that on the Black Magic, one of the Black Magic forums yesterday. People were saying, "What do you need 12K for?" And I said, "Well, streaming, live streaming, of course. That's the main reason." So if I was in the market for a camera body that was $10,000, this would be a top contender. Period. But
I like it because you're not going to have to replace it in the next couple years. I think it's going to be around for a while. Brad's shaking his head. He doesn't believe me.
No, I was agreeing. Sorry. I was scrolling through Grant's presentation on YouTube. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I don't plan on replacing my 6K Pocket for a few years. So
right.
If I have this, I don't know when I would bother replacing it. Other than, like I said, the next shift in computational photography meeting digital cinema and getting, for example, maybe a completely different type of sensor that's like we saw Lytro before, may they rest in peace, but Lytro was exploring the whole light field concept and being able to focus later and all that. So until we hit that level of image capture, I think that this camera, and even then, like, there'll still be a charm to using a camera like this. So I don't see why you would need to replace it.
So
I had sorry, before you get to the comment, I had a shoot a couple weeks ago with my 6K Pocket, and I noticed some stuck pixels, and that was kind of depressing. But the camera actually has a pixel remapping function where it'll go and knock those out. And I thought about it, and I was like, do I really, with a 6K sensor, do I feel bad about losing 3 pixels?
Yes.
No, not really.
You paid for them. You want them.
You know what, though? On the Tom Cruise film, what was it? Mission Impossible 3? Mm-hmm. When we were delivering all the behind-the-scenes materials, there was 1 pixel that didn't pass QC, and we had to go back in and fix it.
Yeah. Well, there's an in-camera function on the Pocket Cinema, and I imagine it's on all the Blackmagic cameras, where it will actually do pixel remapping and try to fix those.
That's great.
Or knock them out.
Right. That's fantastic.
So anyway, what was the comment?
The comment says, did you already talk about how the new 12K Ursa only records in B-RAW? Yes, we did. So far as we know, it only records in B-RAW.
Yeah, I would think that they'll... No, he
doesn't it record in ProRes in the lower resolutions?
Well, the 12K end I'm talking about.
Oh, 12K,
I mean, in order to play those 9 streams of 12K on that Mac Pro, I'm going to presume that was B-RAW, and I don't know if they would if that would play back with just straight RAW.
When he started off the presentation, he introduced the new, more affordable monitors. and he talked about recording on ProRes and DNX, I think, on those. I mean, Blackmagic has supported ProRes and DNX on all their cameras, so I imagine, like, when you have a Pocket 6K, you can shoot 4K ProRes. I would imagine that if they have a 12K sensor that shoots Blackmagic RAW, that they will probably, I don't know for sure, have an 8K ProRes option on it. But at the same time, if Final Cut just supports BRAW, I don't even really care. Right now that's just the limiting factor. I would shoot more in BRAW in my Pocket
Right.
if I I have Resolve. I've cut a feature film. I've cut short films in Resolve. It's okay, but I just know how much more enjoyable cutting in Final Cut is. So I want these worlds to meet a little bit more. Or maybe LumaFusion should just support BRAW, and then we can just go that direction.
Well,
And we'll cut it on an iPad.
when I talked with the Chris and Terry from LumaFusion, I asked them about LumaFusion coming to the Mac because they talked about that a couple years ago. And then they said, nah, we're just going to stick with the iPad. But now that the iPad apps can run on the Mac with the new version when it comes out, they said, well, we're going to let that happen. And I said, well, do you want that to be the version on the Mac, or do you want to now develop a version of it for the Mac? And they said, well, we'll have to think about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I can honestly say Grant has said, and this is yet another innovation that proves it, he really believes in helping filmmakers. He really believes that most of the manufacturers that are out there charge way, way, way too much for their products. And he wants to fill the entire pipeline from start to finish. And I think this camera, I'm really excited about it. And it does, Richard, you've got one too. The Mac Pro can handle all of this really easily.
Yeah.
Right.
But I can't get a new camera till I pay off all my other new equipment.
Exactly. No,
I'll tell you where Grant just saved me a whole bunch of money. I don't think we've said this on the show live, but I've got and I know that Atomos and Blackmagic aren't necessarily friends, but I've got a Sumo 19 that I picked up used for $1,000. It's in great condition. And I have the old Ultra Studio mini monitor that was like $100. That's able to do HD standard dynamic range video, and I was trying to figure out how can I get HDR playback because it's an HDR monitor. Apple with Catalina supports HDR through an HDMI connector, but the Sumo was not accepting the signal.
okay.
Like it just wasn't showing anything.
Right.
When you're in the display preferences, I could check a little HDR checkbox. So I jumped up to 60 frames a second and 4K or whatever, and then the Sumo lights up and I can see the screen, but the HDR checkbox goes away. So I'm sitting here pulling my hair out, frustrated, and thinking, do I have to buy that $1,000 box from Blackmagic that hooks up via Thunderbolt and then goes out? And I'm like, I don't want to spend another $1,000. And yesterday,
right.
he announced for $115 a new monitor, 3G monitor thing that will support HD, which this screen is only HD, and it will pass through the Rec 2020 color and the HDR. So Grant just solved a big problem for me, saved me nearly $900, and yeah, you're
Thank you, Grant.
Right. It's the little things. So I'm really excited about that.
No, absolutely. So besides all the technical things, 12K, besides I understand the technical, and the new sensor is just, to me, is just stunningly brilliant. The fact that they developed their own sensor. It's like Mac developing their own, ARM chips now. They're going to be the end-to-end pipeline. And Blackmagic did the same thing. Do you think, how much of the industry knew this 12K was coming? Do you think Michael Cioni knew it was coming?
I mean, I think Michael Cioni's been busy arguing 8K, but here arguing for just 8K. But I will say this: Avid, when they were when they were redesigning their UI and revamping the software last year, said we can support up to 16K. So, so I think that higher resolutions have definitely been on everybody's mind. And now that I think about it, if it's an RGBW sensor, then in order to get pure 4 channels of that, then you do have to jump up to 16K, don't you? So we'll see. But yeah, I think we kind of know it's gonna keep going up and up. The question is, where is the point of diminishing returns? I feel like past 4K, you start to get into that territory quite a bit.
At this point, yes.
For venues and for playing back things, I think you absolutely do. But for capture, maybe there is no limit,
Right. So that's what I was thinking. The fact that for acquisition, yes. For distribution and broadcast, no. Nobody's going to be worried about it.
Which I think you put up a post like 4K is fine, and I said
right.
HD is fine, 4K is great. And what I was specifically referring to was is the distribution. Like that's, and people kind of get those mixed up sometimes, and it's like it's a good idea to shoot more even if you're delivering less.
Right.
It just gives you the flexibility. But I also argue, like, this is where Serena's talking about zooming in on things. You better, if you're going to use this camera and you want to take advantage of that 12K, cropping, you better make sure you have a sharp lens. You better make sure it's in focus, because it doesn't matter if you want to crop in on a blur thing. Right. You're not going to get more out of it.
Absolutely.
Well, for those action shots, you're going to be stomped down anyway. So
yeah, and it depends on what you're shooting. I mean, if you're shooting a dramatic scene, with a close up, I don't see what more you're going to really get out of that. You can already take a 4K or HD image even, and if it's close, you can crop in quite a bit without losing any of the texture or detail.
So, Brad, Alex Johnson says it probably doesn't support ProRes because on the 6K, they don't support ProRes over 4K. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's why I was saying if they support ProRes on the 12K, you'll probably be at a lower resolution of 4K of ProRes. Gotcha. If they do, it's new. The camera's not in our hands. Grant even said this was kind of an early announcement, and that the first cameras that are going to ship out are going to be to the high-end DOPs that they want to get feedback from.
Sure.
So, if the camera gets in the hands of commoners, it'll probably be, I'd say, like late this year, early next year, before, based off of Blackmagic's track record, especially. Serena's got one hiding back there somewhere.
I know. She's probably got 2. She's got one for each hand.
I wish.
But for the rest of us.
I wish. I really, really, really want to shoot with this camera.
So do you think this would have been the NAB announcement if there wasn't NAB this year?
I don't know, because, last year,
it's 3 months.
Blackmagic broke tradition. I think a year before the COVID thing, they already broke tradition and said, we're just going to announce stuff throughout the year because we have so much stuff and we're not going to wait. Okay. However, maybe it would have been an IBC announcement, if that was a thing happening. But they've kind of just been doing these. The other question I had is, did Grant stream this in Australia at 2 a.m. or was this pre-recorded? And my follow-up to that is, if it was pre-recorded, why did they leave so many little stumbles in? They just, I guess, make us think it was live. Yeah. And if they did do a live stream at 2 a.m., then I can definitely forgive all of his stumbling.
I just find Grant to be very real. Just
absolutely, yeah.
He's real. He's charming, but he's not pretentious at all. And I've seen him behind the scenes at that booth at NAB and watch the way he interacts with everybody and his whole team, everybody on the team. They're all really great people, and they work really hard. Of course, everybody in tech does, but I just love the way Grant supports filmmakers and wants to make it easy for us.
Yep. I agree. not working. There we go. I agree. Am I coming through?
Yes.
Okay.
I
Yes.
can hear you.
But a year ago at NAB, I remember that he gave somebody that Steve Jobs stare when there was a problem. I remember that. He looked over at somebody.
Well-
There was some kind of and he looked over him like Steve Jobs looked over at people when there were problems.
Well, he's a perfectionist, you
No,
know. I
know.
mean,
No, absolutely.
yeah. Try
I
working
admire
with
him.
Barbara Streisand.
Well, I guess it's fun to watch. He's definitely not. He's doing a good job presenting. I don't want to take away from that, but I do notice that he's just real. He's just talking to you, and he stumbles every once in a while. And that's why I had the question: did they live stream it or did they pre-record it? And if they pre-recorded it, there was a couple things as an editor I would have edited out.
Right. Absolutely.
But, I mean, he does kind of. I'm scrolling through. He does kind of look like he's got that blurry-eyed. It's 2 a.m. in Australia look. But
Brad.
it was great. I was cheering it on through the whole thing. So it's a really cool thing.
So no IBC this year, right?
Nope.
No.
I don't know. Are they doing any sort of like? Because NAB, they kind of did a post sort of like, oh, we have these training events and things. Is there anything like that? I haven't really paid attention.
I don't know.
I know they announced the cancellation, but I don't know if they've announced a virtual version or not. I don't think so.
I'll tell you one thing that is happening, though, is all of these Zoom meetings are becoming unmanageable. There's so many of them, and they're overlapping each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard, you know. I'm a bit of an information junkie, and it's just hard when there's so many of them. You're missing some, and I always say I'm going to go back and watch them later, and I never do.
Well, so what's going on with that TikTok? The entire countries are canceling it. They have just
malware. It's total malware.
Well, that's the way Zoom started.
No, but TikTok is, get Philip Hodgetts on here and talk to him about TikTok. He said and I looked at some of these, and Brad, you would remember these numbers much better than I do, but the minute you load TikTok on that phone,
right,
they have access to your entire life. And once the malware gets in there, you can't get it off.
I'm just glad that, honestly, I don't know the numbers because I heard about TikTok earlier this year. And I know it took off during the quarantine, but and even a couple of videos I made, some people like, you should put some of this on TikTok. And I there's a certain bandwidth I have when it comes to social media where I can't, I don't have the bandwidth for Twitter, which I think wasn't there a Twitter hack the other day?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Apple. Listen.
If it was really a hack.
Biden got hacked. Apple got hacked. Elon Musk got hacked. Obama got hacked. There's 120 high-profile people who are all of a sudden selling Bitcoin on their Twitter feed. But it was an inside, some kind of a social engineering where they got inside to somebody and bribed them or something to get inside. It wasn't like an external hack.
Interesting. So,
well,
I mean,
once you've been hacked like that, TikTok is, I loaded it. I'm nervous wreck now because I always want to see what's new and, rummage around, and it was a bunch of junk. So I erased it right away. But Philip said, nope, the minute you put that on your phone, you've lost your privacy. Everything, and think about everything you do on your phone.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
I'm telling everybody, don't load it. If you haven't loaded it, don't do it.
Right.
I remember when I was hacked a few years ago, and the engineers said, this is a variation of the Stuxnet virus, that the one that wiped out 250 terabytes. And I said, how am I gonna clean this up? Because I'm pretty good at going in and fixing the code and getting rid of stuff. I've been hacked before, but they said this one, the only way you can get rid of this one, buy a new computer.
Wow.
And start from scratch.
Wow. So we got a comment that said, Julian Smith said, first post, there is going to be an online IBC. So we have that clarified.
Oh, okay. That doesn't surprise me. It tells you probably how well it's going to be attended and thanks for paying attention. But I like IBC, so
I love that we have smart people listening in.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. They have, so we didn't really resolve anything about 12K if it's necessary or not, but I think
the point is the new sensor, super
Yes.
sampling is good, pure 4K. I think that's a big deal. I think having a much, because, you don't have to shoot the higher resolutions to take advantage of a higher resolution sensor. I think those are the takeaways. And the fact it's only a $10,000 camera. Just, don't shoot everything in 12K if you can't afford to spend, $30,000 or $40,000 on storage.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's one of the reasons I like my GH4 and GH5 is because of the file sizes, the extreme quality. I mean, the GH5, it's 3 years old now or 2 years. I think it's 3 years old. I can shoot internally 5K, and if I had an anamorphic lens, I can shoot 6K anamorphically internally. No external recorder required. And it looks absolutely amazing, but I like the smaller file sizes compared to ProRes. So that's, the storage is a consideration.
Yep.
Actually, I'm looking for an anamorphic lens for my GH5.
So there's a company that had a 50 that they announced earlier, and now they're coming out with a 35.
Okay.
With an S. I can send you a link. But they're coming out with a 35 millimeter anamorphic lens, and it's micro 4/3 mount, so it'd work with.
Okay, GH5.
Yeah, I think it would work.
I've never shot with a GH5. You've been talking about that one for a while.
Well, I had the GH4 before that, and then they got the GH5. The GH5 is a fantastic, fantastic camera.
Yeah, I know you like that.
And it's small, portable, great quality. You put a good lens on it or a couple good lenses. You have the XLR adapter now that bypasses the 1/8" jack, the preamp. It bypasses electronically and goes right inside. It's a great camera. But I'm still looking for.
Is that what you're shooting with now? What
GH4.
we're looking at? Oh, you're
GH4.
using the GH4?
Right.
Brad, what do you use for Zoom calls?
So I have my Blackmagic Cinema camera routed through the A10 Mini Pro that I can use for that. Right now, I'm just using my webcam. I need to fix some lighting things because I need to get some drapes over this window over here. Because when I shoot from this angle, it just blows out. And for some reason, Skype and Zoom try to compensate the brightness of your image. So if it sees a bright highlight back there, it darkens everything else down. So I need to fix that. I don't have it hooked up at the moment for that reason, and because I keep taking the A10 Mini out, and I've been doing a show. If you guys know Alan Seawright.
Yes.
We've been doing a show called Cinema Therapy, and so it's just a couple of us in a room, and we hook up 3 pocket cameras, and I use that little A10 Mini as a switcher to do the show, which has been a really awesome tool to be able
Absolutely.
to use.
It looks like it is, yeah.
So I keep I keep taking it out and setting it up somewhere, and then when I get back home, I'm too lazy to plug it all back in. But maybe I'll have to buy 2.
Yeah.
So you can have the road version and the stay-at-home version.
That's the one advantage I have. I use the GH4 because I don't use it. I use my GH5, so I just leave it set up. And this room, this is my upstairs studio. I just walk in here and adjust a few things, check a few things, and then I just I can go live.
Yep.
It's nice to have that advantage.
Yep. That's why, like I said, the cinema camera. Now that I have a Pocket 6K, it's like I don't really need to take it out as much. So that's kind of my webcam. Not using it at the moment, but
right. But even with the Pocket 6K, you shoot 4K mostly.
Usually I'll shoot 4K ProRes on it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I recorded 4K ProRes HQ. I brought that into a 6K timeline in Resolve. I did the same shot. It was of a bookshelf, like a lot of letters and details. I put a light on it, so it was really sharp. Stopped down the lens, and I shot 6K B-RAW. I blew up the 4K ProRes to the 6K B-RAW. I put one on V2 and one on V1, toggled on and off the track, zoomed in like 600%. I couldn't see a huge difference, if any at all, in terms of the quality that I was getting from the 4K ProRes versus the 6K B-RAW. That could just be a limitation of the lens I was using in part. But even you would think that the pixels and the noise patterns would be a little different.
Yeah.
I love having a 6K sensor that I can downscale to 4K. I think it looks incredibly sharp and detailed, and it's pretty cool. I would shoot in 6K RAW. Actually, if we can get Grant on the line, I have two complaints about the A10 Mini Pro. Two complaints.
Oh, what?
Go ahead.
What?
First is when you hook it up to the pocket cameras, it's like you can control the settings, which is cool.
Right.
Sometimes it gets a little finicky, especially with longer HDMI cables. But they have the ability to plug in a USB drive and you can record to it.
Okay.
Now I thought it'd be really cool, since it's sending time code out to all the cameras, that if you hit record, or at least there should be some option for this, that when you hit record on the A10 Mini Pro, my assumption was that all the cameras would start rolling at the same time, which would be amazing. They do not. So fortunately, I have a phone app I can use for at least one of them, but we have to go around and make sure they're all recording first. And I'm like, no, I just want to hit record on it.
Sure.
And they record.
Absolutely.
The second complaint I have is that when you're hooked up to the A10 Mini Pro, the ProRes recording options are locked out. So you have to shoot B-RAW. So which means if you've got a 6K pocket camera, you're shooting 6K B-RAW. But what if you only want 4K ProRes LT or even HD ProRes LT because you're doing a long event? You could record so much longer on that card without having to dump data, which this was a real world problem in doing the cinema therapy show, where we were running out of space. And because we were recording like 4 or 5 of these shows or more in a single day. And so then late in the day, we're like, we have to stop. We have to dump everything.
Right.
And if we could just record in ProRes LT 4K, problem solved. But it locks you out of those controls when you're plugged into the A10. And I'm like, well, why? That just makes me really... Not that I totally hate recording in B-RAW. I love having...
No, I understand. But that can be probably fixed in post, right? I mean, not in post, but...
Both those things could be corrected
firmware, right.
Firmware.
Right.
So we have to fill out a form and complain to them.
Send it to the Apple team.
It's not a complaint, it's a feature request.
Send it to the Apple team. So I'm sorry, I sent it by mistake. This meant to. So we have a comment from Daniel Suzuki. What were the file size differences between 4K ProRes and 6K B-RAW? Are they comparable, or is the B-RAW more?
So the B-RAW, we actually shot 12:1. I don't have the exact figures because I wasn't able to shoot one in ProRes and one in 6K for the same duration. That being said, I know that with 6K B-RAW at 12:1, which is the highest compression ratio we could do, we were still eating up. We were still eating up way. Hey, look, it's Chris Fenwick. Am I frozen?
Yes.
Hold up. I gotta decline.
Chris calling you? Say hi, Chris.
Yeah, he locked up my camera. Am I still? I feel like I'm locked.
He did that on purpose. He did that on purpose.
Chris Fenwick locked up my camera. Well, maybe I should go anyway. But sorry, what we're saying? Oh, the file sizes. So 6K B-RAW at 12:1 was still larger than like ProRes. Now I don't know HQ, but regular ProRes and ProRes LT at 4K they were much smaller files. You could record a lot longer. So I don't know. It's a lot more pixels. It's a lot more resolution.
So I got a comment that asked me, what mic are you using for the stream? It sounds great. It's my my Neumann TLM 103. Let's see if Brad comes. There he is. There you are.
There we go.
There you are.
Turn it off and on again. There you
Richard, what's the difference between the 102 and the 103? Well, the 103 can run digital.
No, it's analog. It's 100% analog.
Still analog? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't remember. When I went to get a mic about 3 or 4 years ago, I was looking at the AKG, was it a 415 or whatever that one was, and now looking at this Neumann, and the guys that I was talking to, I think it was somebody from Sweetwater, they said, you get the Neumann. It's a great microphone, And
I love the Neumanns.
I have I have a recording studio. I have 30 or 40 microphones, mostly SM58s, 57s. I have a couple of Electro Voice RE20s. You see those always on DJs using them. And I have some other Sennheiser microphones, but this is my favorite mic by far. So
ask the person who was it asked that question?
Damien Shigiri.
Damien. Ask Damien.
Damon.
I'm
Sorry.
on the 102. You're on the 103. Bradley, you're on a what are you on? Apogee?
Apogee.
I like his
96.
mic. I like Brad's mic.
Thank you.
I think it sounds good. Of course, I have a soprano voice, so it's hard to compare, but I'm just wondering if that person watching can tell a big difference between all of our microphones.
Probably over Skype. That's the.
Skype's going to ruin it anyway.
Yep. Skype is going to look for the noise cancellation and the filters and all that compression. So.
Well, but the audio out of Skype is still better than the audio out of Zoom.
Yes, that's true.
Is that right?
I was just thinking about file sizes since we were on that topic before. There's a show that I was doing before COVID called Dry Bar Comedy, and we shoot on 3 reds. At those seasons, we were shooting 3 reds, and one was a 6K Dragon. Actually, they're all 6K Dragons, but we were shooting cropped 4K on 2 of them. And 6K we're shooting 12:1, and the 4K cameras were shooting 8:1, and then the other 2 were the Sony A7Ss. Did we lose Serena? Serena left. She's like, I'm done. I don't care about cameras anymore. Anyway, we were shooting with the Ninjas on the Sony cameras, and they were shooting ProRes HQ and 4K, and the Reds shooting 8:1 Red RAW were actually slightly smaller file sizes than the 4K ProRes HQ files from the Atomos recorders. So if it was the same resolution, then actually compressed RAW is going to be a smaller file. But because I think I'm going to 6K, and 6K 12:1 is still larger than the 4K ProRes files. So there you go.
There you go.
By the exact amount, whatever, I don't know. But did Serena say goodbye, or she just dropped off?
Oh, she just said, "Heck with you guys, I'm leaving." We wouldn't stop talking, I guess. No, I'm not sure what happened, but it was weird because normally in Ecamm Live I have a choice with Skype. I can directly choose the Skype person, or I can choose Skype active speaker. And so when I switched to you full screen or Serena full screen, I had the active speaker selected. When she left, it was gone.
Sorry.
There she is.
There she is.
I called you back because I was like, she didn't say goodbye. So
No, I just trying to eliminate some of the clutter on my desktop, and I quit out of Skype. I apologize.
Well, Skype is clutter. Skype is clutter, so
that's a good
it's
point.
Crazy.
Absolutely.
Well, I should probably get going myself.
Yeah, I'm going to have to take off too. You guys are awesome. You're both so fun to talk to. And Brad, you've got a great brain. I love your brain.
I think a lot. It doesn't mean I have all the answers. So I was telling Patrick Southern today that I miss his videos you do for LumaForge so he could explain this stuff to me a little bit better.
Yeah.
But
how's Patrick doing?
I think he's doing good. He's out there at Frame.io changing the world. So
that's great.
And I believe has a kid on the way. So we'll have to catch up with him.
So we have a couple of comments before you go. Zoom trashes your audio and video. It always amounts to a different amount of delay in your audio sync.
Yep.
And he was talking about Damon's talking about the quality of the mics. He's also the proximity of the mics. My mic is about 4 to 5 inches away. They just can't see it. It's just out of.
I used to be kind of right here, but I'm lazy and I'm a little bit further away. I think it's okay though.
No, I've always liked your mic.
Far away.
Right. I've always liked your mic, Brad, for USB mic. I just got to stop buying mics. I hear somebody's mic, I say, "Oh, I like that," and I buy it and I don't use it. It sits in a box because this thing is so great.
It's gear. It's our disease that we have.
Well, audio is great though. I love audio. I love microphones. I just brought my reel-to-reel decks back online. I have a 16-track and an 8-track, and I just love it. But today I belong to 2 vintage tape recorder groups, reel-to-reel tape recorder groups on Facebook. And I was asking about what tape can you buy nowadays? One reel, I use half-inch, used to use Ampex 456. One reel of half-inch Ampex, it's not Ampex anymore, it's some other brand. It's the only one that's reliable, $120, and that records 33 minutes at 15 inches per second.
I have all of these tapes from back, way back from when I was working at AFN even, and then over the years recorded on a lot of those old Ampex tapes. I have not played them in a long time, and I'm hoping they haven't degraded.
Do you have a tape recorder?
Yes, I've got a couple of them. I can play them. I'm just
be careful.
Yeah.
You might have to. You have to bake them.
Oh.
8 hours at 8 hours at 130 degrees.
And then they light on fire. Thanks, Richard.
No, they.
Wait a minute. Bake what?
The tapes.
The
That's
tapes?
crazy.
You might have to. I've been recording on reel-to-reel tape through the 80s, through the 90s. Those tapes, the first one I played years ago, one of the bands said, "Hey, do you still have our tape?" I said, "Actually, I do. Can you digitize it for me?" I said, "Yeah, let me go ahead and digitize it, whatever. $100 for the session. It completely gunked up my Tascam deck. I had to mail that heavy deck back to California to get them to clean it up. And then they told me what was going on. That tape, the old tape, it sheds. And even like the Rolling Stones masters and Led Zeppelin masters, all the tape sheds, and you have to bake it at 8 hours at 130 degrees, plus or minus. And then you can digitize it you might have a week or 2 weeks where you can digitize it. After that.
Serena's
That's
in
scary.
California. She just has to drive out to the desert and leave her car.
That's true.
Yeah, it was 122 degrees outside on my back patio yesterday.
Oh,
you're
just put 'em on your
kidding.
back patio.
And I'm in San Diego. That's with the sun right on it,
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
So just put them on your back
Well, that's
porch.
interesting. Yeah, I'd be afraid that some of those tapes are just irreplaceable, but I thought it would be the machine that would chew them up, that maybe I should have the machine.
No, it depends on what format.
And everything.
If it's an Ampex 456, which is one of the most popular brands, it had its back coating in it. It just sheds and gunks everything up. They call it shedding syndrome. So,
well, you're also not supposed to store them flat. You're supposed to store them sitting up.
Well, you should let it play, not rewind it. Play to a reel evenly and store that reel. Don't rewind it back and store it on that reel because it gets all uneven and everything. And you should play the tapes anyway every so many years because they'll stick together. There's all kinds of things. But I found tape, $120 a reel. So I'm recording a new album, a new CD, and I am going to record on reel-to-reel.
I love it. Oh, that's awesome.
But I'm going to back it up in Logic too. I'm going to do both at the same time, but I'm going to record on reel-to-reel. I've made my mind up, so.
Well,
all right. Well, I'm going to have to take off.
Okay.
You already did that once, Serena.
I know. I just clicked goodbye.
That's
so
you. That you did.
I should go more. I should go as well. I mean, so good to see you, Serena.
Thank you, Richard.
Absolutely,
Bye,
everyone.
Brad. Nice to see you, and thanks to everybody watching.
Absolutely.
And for your great questions. Bye.
I'm going to hang on for a little bit, everybody, just for a couple more minutes. So see you guys later. Thanks so much for joining in.
Bye-bye.
There we go. I am back just by myself for just a minute. And so the deal is there's no decision that's been made about whether we need 12K or not, right? Nobody really made a decision. We were just discussing it. Is Final Cut going to support it? It's going to have to support B-RAW. Final Cut is going forward. If it's going to, because that's the only thing that plays, that the 12K records in, not plays in. So if the 12K is going to be a camera that becomes popular, Final Cut is going to have to support B-RAW. So hopefully that's forthcoming. So I think that's about it for today. Thanks everybody for joining in. We decided just to go live just to talk about the Blackmagic announcement of the 12K. It caught everybody off guard. Michael Cioni, if you're watching, send me a message to let me know if you knew this 12K was coming. I'll be curious if you knew the 12K camera was coming at a price point of $10,000. Not even $10,000, plus the lens, of course, plus storage. I mean, of course, that all happens, but... So Al, I was talking about tapes, and Alex says, do you do a marinate or dry rub on those tapes? I don't do either. It's an interesting thing that the tapes don't, they absorb moisture over the years, even if you have them in humidity control, because I have humidity controlled, they absorb moisture and the backing comes off, apparently. That's apparently what happens. So good thing is that there is tape available that you can play in 2020. I'm going to buy 1 or 2 reels, $120 a reel for half-inch. I use half-inch. And I'm going to record my CD, my new CD, on reel-to-reel. So I think that's going to be it for today. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. So we got a comment. How did you figure this out to bake them? When I ruined my one Tascam deck, I sent it to Tascam. They cleaned it up. They put me in touch with the guy that developed this baking technique. This is back maybe 2000, early 2000s. They put me in touch with the guy that developed this baking technique, and we were back and forth. He was telling me what to do with the baking and stuff, and it works. I have had no tape that I couldn't digitize after baking it. As a matter of fact, I've done some twice. I did some 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I can't find the sessions that I did, the digital files. I record 24-bit audio, probably 44.1 kilohertz, but 24-bit, and I couldn't find the sessions. I didn't label them properly or more efficiently. I went back just recently and redigitized them. It worked again. It works fine. It works really, really well, but the tape will eventually reabsorb moisture and it will become unusable again. So you really have to bake them to be safe. All right, everyone. I want to thank you all for stopping out. My name's Richard Taylor. This is Final Cut Pro Radio, RTV Live. We had Brad Olson today, Chuck Braverman, and my guest, Serena Catania. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by. We will see you on the next RTV Live.